Welcome back to my channel, Navigating Midlife Live. And today I have a special guest for this episode, and I'm really excited for you to hear more about her, the work that she does. Her name is Carolyn Dalton, and she is the founder of the Stretch Space here in Vancouver, BC. So, unfortunately, for those of you who aren't in Vancouver, you can't experience her work in person, but she definitely has a presence on social media and on YouTube, so you can watch videos. Carolyn and I were just talking, and I couldn't remember exactly when we met, but we met 6 years ago. And what's interesting is when I met her,
Mm.
her studio was in the neighborhood that I live in, and I'd walk down the street and I'm like, oh, the Stretch Space, what is that place? And then, months later, I ended up meeting Carolyn, and we got talking about what we do. And of course, I thought, well, the best way for me to learn about Carolyn is to go book a session with her. And we'll talk more about that in a second. But Carolyn, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you making the time because I know it can be hard to coordinate two busy people's schedules.
Yeah, thanks, Connie. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So, of course, you know me, and my focus is menopause. And I know that you work with all types of clients of all ages, and not just women, both men and women. But one of the things that, of course, I'm so passionate about, of course, is menopause. And the other thing that I'm extremely passionate about is helping women understand that, okay, I'm not going to deny the stages of menopause can be challenging, and we can, start to feel our body starts to feel different, or it starts to move different, or we wake up one morning and we go, who put me into a body I don't even recognize anymore? So there's
Mhm.
definitely those challenges. But I think that I'm a big believer in doing everything that we can do to support our bodies so that we are, I always like to say, empowered in the bodies that we're in. Because I believe if we give our bodies the right support, they're going to, of course, support us back. So, what are your thoughts on that? And the different all the different
Mhm.
clients that you work with and the things that you see.
Yeah. Um, yeah, well, I have not experienced menopause myself. I'm only 38, but even even just the changes from like my early 30s to now, well, I'm almost 39, like it's coming, right? And it will be here before I know it. And I'm witnessing some of my friends going, starting perimenopause. And so it's definitely been something I'm kind of more curious about and actually passionate about. And I do support a lot of women in that life phase. And yeah, I mean, a lot of changes happen to the body, of course. When estrogen lowers, it really does impact, well, it impacts everything, but it really does impact our connective tissue. It lowers elastin, so it makes our fascial tissue, which is what I really work with. It makes it less elasticy and less glidey, and that's what we want for healthy movement and healthy support of the body. So, yeah, like you said, we can't deny these biological things that are happening, but it's like, all right, how can I tune in to my own body and accept it and love it for what it's going through? And yeah, really listen. And like through the work that I do, which is hands-on assisted stretching work and fascial release and breath work, it's not about fixing. It's about becoming like befriending your body. So I really treat what I do as an embodiment practice and as an invitation for people to tune in, to get curious, to slow down, to listen. And through that process, we can unwind tension. A lot of benefits will happen, but I think the biggest thing is just really like we're constantly getting to know our body, right? And when we go through this phase called menopause, yeah, it's an opportunity to tune in and see what's there.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. I did just write out a few questions because there were a few things that I kind of really wanted to focus on with you. Um,
Mhm.
one of my questions was how stretch therapy supports mobility, and you sort of just answered that, by supporting the fascia. And as I mentioned, I've had sessions with you, and what always amazes me is they are so gentle. Like literally, you do the initial assessment, but then after that, I'm lying on the table and you're moving my body, and
Mhm.
it really is a very easy, gentle session.
Mhm.
And, I allow you to push me a bit more because, of course, I know I am very connected to my body. So when you're stretching me, I do allow you to stretch me a little bit further because I know that my body can handle it just because of all the things
Mhm.
I've been doing over the last 19 years. But what amazes me is, I walk out and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, like I'm kind of feeling, yeah, I've had, my body's had some work. I
Mhm.
wouldn't equate it to feeling like I've just done a hard workout or anything. But sometimes what amazes me is the next day, and it's like, oh, oh, okay, I'm feeling that.
Mhm.
And yet the work you're doing is so gentle, so that's what I love, because it's not one of those moments, and no disregard to chiropractors, but sometimes people get really stressed about going in for a chiropractor treatment, and oh, what are they going to pop here, there, and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
like all of the modalities, I feel, are important to give us all that range of motion. But I'm still so amazed as to how my body feels. And yet the work you do on me, honestly, is so gentle. I feel like I'm just laying there.
Mhm.
You're
Mhm.
moving parts of my body and it feels good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's something that a lot of people also say. They're like, what? Like, I thought nothing was happening. Like, how it can be so gentle, but yet so powerful and so effective. And so there's a lot actually to that and a lot happening there. So what's happening is when you can fully let go. So what's different between assisted stretching and there's many different even modalities and methods of assisted stretching. Like what we do is kind of unique, I'm learning, very influenced by a lot of different backgrounds and trainings that I have. But yeah, essentially we're working with the fascial system. So I'm tuning into your entire fascial network. And when your body lets go, so when I support the body so that you don't have to hold yourself, then you allow, like gravity is working with you, and you allow yourself to reorganize. So I think of it more as a reorganization, even rather than a stretch. And I'm always listening for that first point of resistance. So as I go into a movement or to a stretch, I'm working way under your end range of your joint, right? Like your joint might be able to go way back here, but if we really slow down and listen, like even here in my own body, as I float my arm up, like I can feel a little resistance right here. I could push it here and there's no pain, but there's something here. So when we work within that range and I support you and you can just totally let go, then unwinding starts to happen. And it might not even be in that area. I might be actually feeling tension somewhere else that's creating that tension. And if we were to just push through it, we're actually missing a lot of opportunities for unwinding. So that's why we work really slow. you work gentle. And then once things have opened up a bit, then you can kind of start challenging the joint and moving the joints around. And everybody's body responds differently, but yeah, it's a reorganizing. So when we free up the areas that have been like habitually, you know, tense, or, you know, we all have our patterns in our body that we have. And you know, it's not about like eliminating them forever, it's about getting to know them. So again, like I'm always coming back to that piece about like getting to know your body. um and yeah, if you are going through a lot of changes in your body, like I just think it's a really good practice to slow down enough to actually listen. Because yeah, like, you know, people go to their chiropractor, and yeah, not to bash chiropractors, because it definitely has a place. But it can often be so quick, right? And that's part of their whole model, is like it's quick, you get in, you get out. But the body, and like the more and more I learn about fascial science, the more I know that like the body is slow and the fascial system is slow, and the body takes time to develop these patterns that we have, that keep us in tension, that keep us in funky alignment, and the body takes time to unwind that. So anything that is sold as a quick fix is a lie, because the body, the nervous system, it takes time to truly reorganize. So you may get a relief in a moment, but if you don't address the entire fascial structure, it's just going to come back.
Yeah, yeah, and that is so true. There's a couple things that you said there, that I wanted to focus on, because I think that a lot of people, and hard to say, sort of where this came from, but so much of our body when we're working with, and no slight to this, but when we're working in sort of the mainstream medical system, so much of our body is viewed in parts. And I think that starts to get us to view in parts. It's like,
Yes.
oh, well, my back is aching. So it
Hmm.
ends up being a focus of, well, what's wrong with the back? And I
Yeah.
think something that is really important for people to understand and even to learn and start to think differently is we're literally connected from the top of our head to the tip of our toes. And
Hmm.
even I didn't really know that until I didn't even know that when I initially started, lifting weights. But
Hmm.
working with practitioners like you and some of the other practitioners that I've worked with, and
Hmm.
teaching me that, everything's connected. So something in our back could actually be something lower down in our body that, like you say, is just, it's not flowing, it's not connected. And
Yeah,
so I love the fact
absolutely.
that you said looking at that resistance and knowing that it
Hmm.
could be coming from somewhere else.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a couple of things there. First of all, I feel like, yes, we are connected head to toe, but I think we're actually connected out. It begins outside of us as well.
True.
It's
Very true.
in the energetic field, right? Because the nervous system is in our body, but as human animals, like we are designed to co-regulate to our other humans and to our environment. So you can think of like, you know, the way we hold ourselves and the habitual postural patterns that we develop over our life are a result of our nervous system, which is a result of how we relate to the world, right?
Yeah.
So if the world is a scary place for you, then you may put on a posture that reflects that, right? If the world is a place you always have to work hard in, right? Then that posture will start to form into your fascial system. So, yeah, we're head to toe connected, and we're out here connected.
Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful point, and you're so right. I mean, we can tend to look just like, at this like skin suit, right? Of that's all there
Mhm.
is. But you're right, there is that energy beyond us, and our environments
Mhm.
that we're either working in or
Mhm.
living. So that is so true. So,
Mhm.
do you sometimes get clients coming to you that they, you know, they're potentially not really connected to their body, and somehow they found you, or they were referred to you. And do you find that sometimes there is that resistance to like trust you, like to just let go and let you move their bodies because they're so used to doing it on their own?
Yeah, 100%. I always say that is the hardest part, is just learning to let go. And even for people who are very connected to their body, sometimes, they might be surprised. They come in, they're like, oh yeah, this looks great. And then they lay down on the table and I start moving them around and, they're like, oh, shit, I can't let go. Like there's something there, right? And that can kind of surprise people sometimes. So I always try to, that's when I might crack a little joke, try to make them feel good. It's okay, right? Like it's not super normal to like just meet somebody and then 5 minutes later they're like swirling your leg around, right? So it does take time to trust, and that safety in the body, feeling safe in your body is the most important thing for being able to let go. Because if you don't feel safe, you can't let go.
Exactly.
And yeah, and sometimes we're protecting something, right? We're guarding an old injury. Um, so again, like the slower we move, the gentler we move, the brain kind of will start to tell the body, like, it's safe here. I'm not feeling pain here. This is safe, right? And then from that place, we can start to move, and then we're creating those brain body connections. And again, that's going to create more lasting change than, someone just like digging in and you're kind of like, you're wincing, right? So, and then, yeah, some people come in, they think, oh, stretch therapy, cool. Someone's going to stretch me. I'm going to do the splits or whatever, right? And then they get on the table and realize, like, oh, like, okay, maybe they start crying, or I don't know, all kinds of things happen. It's could be kind of a tricky thing to even explain to people. Like,
Yeah.
you just got to feel it.
Well, that's actually a really interesting point, because one of the things that I experienced now, years ago, I had like, regular massages from a registered massage therapist. And then
Mhm,
when I was doing in my bodybuilding competition, because of all of the things that I had to do, and, the posing I had to do and all that kind of stuff, I was
mhm,
referred to a rolfer, which a lot of people
mhm,
aren't familiar with rolfing, but
mhm,
it's very deep work.
mhm,
And I was surprised when I was doing that work with the rolfer that there was emotion coming up. And, like you say, like I started to cry, and it wasn't
mhm,
from pain. And it really took me by surprise. It's like, why am I so emotional? And then, of course, I
mhm,
learned that we can hold emotions in our bodies. And
mhm,
I think that for some people, that can really take them by surprise as to, why am I feeling this way? I mean, I'm used to it now. It's like, yeah, just let it come out.
mhm.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Well, I like to say that emotion is energy in motion.
Right.
So energy in motion is emotion. So when we move energy in an area that maybe hasn't been moved for a while, stuff can come up and we might not even know what it's about. We don't need to know what it's about. We don't need to understand in the mind, but if that is coming up for you as you're experiencing, body work, or you're even doing movement yourself or through something like breath work, is just trust it. It's like that is your body, and it's really authentic, right? When it's really coming up from your body, it means that thing wants to be moved. It wants to, yeah, be set free.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. One of the things I also remember you saying to me once when I went in to have a session with you was, um, move our bodies in different ways, even when we're in the kitchen. And,
Mm.
before, for example, I'd go to put something in one of the lower cupboards, and I'd typically just bend over and, put that pot on that shelf. And you said to me,
Mhm.
like, hey, we can do squats in our kitchen, like, getting down
Yeah.
to that lower scalp and, squatting to grab that pot. And it's something I do all the time now. Like in my kitchen, I'm moving different ways. And I'm like, thank you, Carolyn. um,
Yay. That's
but
awesome.
like you say, we get into habits, right, of moving certain ways all the time rather
Mhm.
than figuring out, different ways to move even when we're doing things at home.
Mhm. Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Like, um, yeah, there's this woman, her name's Katie Bowman. She's a real, yeah, you should look her up. She's great. She's like a biomechanist, kind of real pioneer, I guess, in this field. And she's got a house with like no furniture, or like she's cut all the legs off of her chairs so that you have to sit on the ground. And she purposely like puts the things that she uses the most in like the highest shelf or the lowest shelf to encourage that movement diversity. So I'm not quite that extreme, but I've always been inspired by her work. And yeah, like we have to think about the many, many, many movements we do during the entire day, right? Not just the movements we do in our 1 hour workout or, when we're thinking about it. So yeah, I think that's just like embracing a movement rich life. Like you don't always have to go to the gym and do a hardcore workout, but like how are you moving in your day to day? Yeah, are you aware, right? Like I love using brushing your teeth as an example too. Like first of all, you can brush with the other hand, right? Which is I do sometimes. That's really hard.
Right.
Or when you're brushing your teeth, like how are you standing? Do you have equal weight on both feet, or do you have one weight in one side, or can you balance? Can you lift one leg off the floor as you brush your teeth, or you're waiting for your coffee, instead of just standing there or scrolling on your phone, like maybe do a couple squats, or I love the I call it countertop stretch, where you just put your hands on your countertop and you lean back to like a nice stretch through your back body. Yeah, just little things like that. And like you said, once you start doing it, it just kind of becomes fun and like something that you do.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think it is really important. And I guess to relate that back to menopause, as you mentioned, when our estrogen starts to change, that does start to change our muscle structure and, the ligaments, the collagen, all that kind of stuff, which there's things
Mhm.
that we can do to help to maintain that. But I think that we do forget, when we're doing things at home, that we can do them different ways. When I'm silly example, but when I'm washing my shower down, I'm using like my left hand and my right hand.
Mhm.
I'm very
Yeah,
right-handed, right? So it's like, well, got to get this guy moving here, um, and
totally.
and realizing, right, that being so left or right-handed and doing a lot of work on the computer, that I have this very forward motion. So I'm always looking for ways that I can, just keep both sides active, but then also
Mhm.
finding ways that that I can do some back motions as well too,
Yeah, move back. Yeah.
right?
I know, yeah. Yeah, our modern life doesn't give us very many opportunities to like move behind and even rotate, right? Because everything now is here. And I always use the car example, right? Everyone has their camera, their rear view camera in their car in front of them now. So we don't have to turn our heads anymore. And the amount of like elderly people I see in the neighborhood that are going to walk across the street and they need to look and they have to turn their whole body in order to look, right? And that's going to affect your proprioception, which is going to make you higher risk of falls and trips. Um, so yeah, another thing I say all the time is move it or lose it. Our bodies were designed, and I like to look at our joints as proof of this, right? It's like we wouldn't have these beautiful ball and socket joints if they weren't designed to move in all directions, right? Like nature made us in this incredible body that was designed to move, right? Each vertebrae has potential for flexion, extension, rotation, lateral movement. right? So again, we don't need to be a contortionist, but we should really be practicing moving our joints in all the ways that they were designed to move every day. And if your day-to-day life doesn't give you opportunities to do that, then you do need to do it, or your body will forget it. And when the brain, the brain and body are connected, so if you don't do a certain movement very much, like you never reach behind you, then one day you might have to do that to put a coat on or something, and that's when you hurt yourself. So it's not that that movement was dangerous, it's just that your brain and your body forgot how to do it.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's about remembering.
absolutely.
Hmm.
So true. But we can help the body remember again. And of course, that's
Of
exactly
course.
what you do, right? You
Yeah,
get the body
exactly.
to, yeah, reconnect and remember, oh yeah, yeah, that's right too. I can move that way. One of the things
Mm-hmm.
that's really common in women when they go into menopause, I haven't experienced this specifically, is
Hmm.
frozen shoulder. And
Hmm.
again,
Yeah.
that, when I was reading that, I'm like, oh, that's bizarre that, women are experiencing this in menopause. And of course, when you think about everything, okay, the estrogen is changing, so that's changing things. And if we're doing a lot of forward work, even if we're, working in the kitchen, right? What are we doing? It's
Hmm.
all forward work.
Yeah.
And that's where,
Hmm.
if I'm doing a lot of forward work and I'm not paying attention to, eh, sort of to my back muscles when I'm at the gym, I can
Hmm.
further imbalance my body, which I did, not
Hmm.
not realizing that I was working towards that, but I did, imbalance my body, and I've really had to work at, making sure that I'm constantly strengthening my back muscles because of all my forward work. And it's unfortunate that, in a lot of situations when women are going to doctors, they've got the frozen shoulder, and they're
Hmm.
immediately they're referred to a physiotherapist. And I think, unfortunately, there's you know there's more that's needed. I think there's more education that's needed around these things, that it isn't just some rehab exercises to get that shoulder and arm moving again. I think, again,
Hmm.
like you say, it's that sort of that whole body essence, right?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to mention that too. Yeah, it's kind of yeah, the whole frozen shoulder in menopause thing, it is very common. Like honestly, I feel like I don't know the percentage, but like there's definitely a trend. Like whenever I get a new woman client who's like 50 or above, like there's a good chance that they either have frozen shoulder or have had frozen shoulder, you know? And I've talked to clients about this before, like, and they'll say, oh yeah, it's really common in menopause. Like it's this symptom, right? But
Right.
why? Like what is actually happening? And I've always been curious and wanted to learn more about that. But what you were just saying is it's lifestyle. It's all of it, and it just happens to show up there, and it makes so much sense. Like if you've been doing computer work, housework, right? We're constantly here, and then with the loss of elasticity in the tissue, the loss of strength in the body and the muscles, right? We're going to fall into these patterns. And yeah, and it lives up here. It's never just in the shoulder either. When I work with people with frozen shoulder, it's never just in the shoulder. It's always up the neck, it's down the back. It might be it's in the hips, it might even be in the feet. Like,
Wow.
yeah, so it's always a full body thing. And and again, not to knock any other profession, but like when you go to a physio and they give you the prescription exercises for your frozen shoulder, yeah, they're missing something. And I think a lot of that is it's just the system, right? Like they just don't have time. They're seeing so many people, they're getting people in and out. And I think, most practitioners have the best of intentions, but it's just the system yeah, it doesn't allow for the time to really spend with people to, yeah, educate and think kind of beyond what this pain symptom is.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And I will say, I feel like I've had a lot of success with frozen shoulder. And I don't like to use, like I say, quotations is it's a thing for sure, but like, I don't know, I don't like to use labels, right? Because it's like, oh, I have this thing, like this is a part of me, it kind of gives people an excuse for not doing things. And it's like, okay, this is a challenge I'm dealing with. Let's get curious about it. Let's see what we can do. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I
Mhm.
remember a couple of years ago, well, actually, maybe even more, maybe more like 5 years ago, when you were doing group sessions, and I
Mhm.
was doing, my resistance training and the group sessions at the same time. And I just remember how my body was responding to both. Like I felt,
Mhm.
um, it just gave me so much more range of motion
Mhm.
altogether. But what I loved about your group sessions, and it's so funny when I was telling somebody about it, they're like, "Well, that's yoga," and I said,
Mhm.
"Well, no, it's not. It's not really, because what I really, really loved is before we did every movement, you explained everything, like how it was connected, and things that we should look for and stuff like that. And I know that some yoga instructors do that, but sometimes things go so fast, and you're just doing the motion, and you're maybe not understanding why you're doing it. And that's what I really
Mhm.
love about your work is, even when you work with me one on one, I can ask you a question of, oh, I'm feeling this, like why am I feeling that all of a sudden?
Mhm.
So that's what I really appreciate, is that,
Mhm.
even when you're doing your group sessions, you're just explaining things so that we learn ourselves to understand our bodies better, to connect into our bodies better as well too.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, thank you, because that's always my intention. I'm like, I hope they're learning something, right? Because I think like, if you go to a class, you're spending your time and your energy doing something, like, don't you want to learn? Don't you want to know what's going on? And, like we were given these incredible bodies and, they don't teach us this stuff in school. Like I had a client today, I was like, asking him to imagine. I'm like, imagine your femur bone softening into your hip socket. He's like, what's my femur bone? I'm like, oh shit, right. Some people don't know. Okay, you can't relax your femur bone if you don't know where it is. So then we had a chat about that. Um, but yeah, and I love yoga. I practice yoga, but yeah, yoga in the modern time, it's yeah, it can move fast. Sometimes there's an intention of like getting a workout or getting the energy moving. Like there's sort of different intentions there. So there isn't always time within that framework to really explain what's going on. And yeah, everyone has a different approach, but I always like to keep things like educational as well as experiential and, not get too in the head because it is about feeling. But yeah, I think it's important to know what's going on in your body. And yeah, I love when people ask questions because I could talk about bodies all day long. It's fun.
You can talk about bodies, I can talk about menopause.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
get it. I totally get it, because I totally
Hmm.
miss out on on all the things that relate to menopause. So I know
Hmm.
that I'm going to do this a little bit backwards. I talked a little bit about, meeting you initially, networking, and that you've got an actual facility here in Vancouver in Kitsilano neighborhood. But you haven't always done stretch therapy. What were you doing before? I know what you did, but if you could share with the audience sort of a little bit of your background and kind of what led you to this.
Yeah, of course. Well, I was a dancer. So yeah, my full-time job for about 10 years, from my early 20s into my 30s was dance, contemporary dance. So yeah, I trained as a dancer like in my youth and childhood, and that was like my biggest passion. I just love dancing, love moving my body, love performing. I started getting into choreography, and I really love like creating, yeah, art for the stage. And I studied contemporary dance in New York City and finished at a 3-year professional training program there. And then when I graduated, just like, dove into a dance career, which is, not an easy thing, and you don't really make a lot of money. But so I waited tables, and then I kind of stopped doing that and started teaching dance. So when I moved back to Vancouver after my time in New York, yeah, I taught dance full time at different dance schools and programs around the Lower Mainland, and then was pursuing my own like artistic work kind of, when I could. And it was great, loved it, a lot of fun. But yeah, after a while, my body, like at 27, 28 years old, my body started screaming at me. And I thought I was really healthy. I thought I was strong. I was very mobile. I never had any injuries, like acute injuries, but I was really starting to develop a lot of like chronic tension patterns, particularly in my hips and in my pelvis. And there was a period of time where it would be so like, it seemed like it came out of nowhere, but I would just wake up in so much pain. All my nerves in my back were like on fire. I'd feel it down one leg some days, I'd feel it down the other leg. Sometimes it'd be right in the middle of my like sacrum area, and my whole body would seize up, and I like couldn't move. And I wouldn't be able to go to work, and that's how I paid my bills. So it was this really frustrating cycle that I was in. And then a few days later, it would pass, and then I'd be fine, and I'd be dancing, and I'd be doing all these crazy moves, and I might have a show, and then a few days later, I'd be in pain and in bed again. So I was getting really tired of this cycle. And I started, seeking help, physio, chiropractor, even medical doctors. I was seeing like sports medicine doctors for a while at UBC, and it was all interesting and helpful. And I had some MRIs, and they found bulging discs and this and that and whatever. But really, nothing came of that. It's like a lot of people have bulging discs, I now know, and it doesn't really mean much. But when I first experienced fascial stretch therapy, yeah, it honestly changed my life. So I had a friend like in the dance world who was a ballet teacher who was training to do FST at the time. And she gave me some sessions and just kind of like practice sessions. And I remember her holding my leg and being like, just let it go. And I couldn't let it go. I had so much holding and guarding in my hips. I could do the splits. I could stick my leg in the air to here. I could jump. I could do all these things, but I couldn't like soften my nervous system enough to let go of that holding. Because anyways, there's a whole story now. I reflect back on like all the trauma I actually went through in dance, from, teachers yelling at you and not feeling good enough and being told no all the time and you're too fat and blah, 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 blah. Right. So all of that was stored in my body. Um, so as soon as I discovered this work, I was just like, wow, this is really cool. And yeah, and I kind of knew right away, I'm like, I need to learn how to do this. So pretty quickly, I started doing the training, and yeah, the rest is history.
Wow. Wow. Well, I'm really glad that you did because I get
Mhm.
from it when when I'm getting a little bit lazy with my movement patterns. It's like, oh, I need Carolyn. My body needs Carolyn.
Aw. Yeah, well, I still love dancing. I was actually dancing last night.
Oh,
It's
cool.
cool. I felt like I needed to kind of go away from dance for a while and actually heal my body. And um, yeah, actually, like getting pregnant and having a baby kind of forced me to stop dancing for a while too. So, yeah, my body's so different now. I used to not even be able to do a proper squat because my femurs wouldn't glide back into the hip sockets because I just had so much tension. I just was in pain all the time. And I was pretending that I was okay, and I wasn't. So through this work of, learning about my fascial system, yeah, unwound like a lot of stuff. And yeah, I'm very grateful.
Let's talk for a second about pelvic health. Because of course
Mhm.
you're a woman, having a baby. I never had a biological child, so something I haven't experienced. But then as we go through menopause, and again, this whole
Mhm.
thing around estrogen and how all the muscles are changing, um, I would say that the work that you do could really help women who are navigating menopause and maybe having pelvic floor issues and all that kind of stuff. What can you share with me on that as far as the work that you do and how you might be able to help those women?
Yeah. Um, Yeah, in a lot of ways. Actually, something this kind of came to mind in another uh, thing that you said, but something that actually really supports the fascia and specifically the elasticity is like bouncing or even jumping, right? Like not aggressive jumping, but like rebound, right? So think like let your heels kind of come up and down off the floor, or even like light jogging, like any kind of rhythmic bounce is really good for, they call the elastic recoil in the fascial system. So,
Okay.
fascial health isn't all about stretching, lengthening, and letting go. It's also about strengthening that tissue. Um, and I know, like in menopause, when the estrogen goes down, we lose the elasticity. So if you can embrace practices that involve some bouncing, even like jumping on a little trampoline, that can be really helpful. And I feel like that often feared as well, like so much, we hear, oh, low impact, you don't want to hurt your joints, but you actually need to build that. You need to work with impact, right, in order to build resilience, not only in your joints, but in the elasticity in your fascia. And that's similar to postpartum when, everything down there expands when you're supporting that baby. And when you're pregnant, you literally have more elastin in your, or relaxin, that's the hormone relaxin in your body that expands your tissues. So there's so many issues with like prolapse or pelvic floor issues, leaking, this kind of thing. So again, it's like after that initial healing phase postpartum, which is like 6 to 8 weeks or whatever, like I think women should be embracing bouncing. I mean, you can even do it with your baby, like sit on a ball, one of those big balls. I used to do this with Florian all the time. It was actually how he went to sleep when he was little. I just held him and I just bounced up and down on
Oh,
my ball. And I don't even think I knew back then, like necessarily, or I wasn't aware that it was also strengthening my pelvic floor and helping the elasticity come back together. Um, so yeah, go for a bounce up and down. It's also fun.
yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, I know
Mhm.
you're a very busy lady, so I don't want to take any more of your time, but I really appreciate you taking the time to share. I'm sure we could continue to talk for hours
Oh,
about
yes.
bodies and all this kind of stuff, but I do appreciate what you have shared and, just giving us a little bit of a background on who you are and how you entered into this space. And, I would just like to say for anybody who's in Vancouver, or gee, if you're coming into Vancouver and you have a few extra
Mm.
days, check out Carolyn's schedule, see if you can get in to see her or one of her team. We didn't even talk about Kian because, of course, your
Mhm.
husband, Kian, the two of you have the stretch space together. But you've really built an incredible business, and you actually inspire me with what the two of you have done, because you've expanded into the breath work and all that kind of stuff and doing retreats and that. So the two of you really are an inspiration to me to see what you've done as small business owners and locally, and you've really built a community, which I think is amazing. So thank you for for everything that you do for the community here as well too.
Aw, thank you. Yeah,
So
that's nice.
yeah, so I'll have Carolyn's her link to to their website down in the description below. If you've got any questions, feel free to post them in the comments below, and I'll make sure that if I can't answer them, that I'll get Carolyn's expertise on them as well too. And thank you very much for joining. And I will be, of course, back next week with another episode of Navigating Midlife Live. As I always say, I never really know what the topic is. It's usually something that comes to mind. Sometimes it's a question that comes up from a client or something that I've read. So stay tuned for next week. But thank you very much, Carolyn. I appreciate your time, and thank you
Yeah,
everybody
thank
for joining.
you.
All right.
Thanks a lot, Connie. Always awesome to chat with you. And yeah, thanks for all that you do and share as well.
Oh, my
Awesome.
pleasure. My pleasure. Well, we're both a little geeky about what we do, right?
Yeah. It's good.
All right.
Cool.
Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.